Righty, I think it's a good time to kick off. Mine is but a brief and very simple and basic task. Welcome everybody. Welcome to Celebrating Women and the month of International Women's Day. Mine is just a very simple task, and then I hand over. And that task really is to say one of the really proud moments that we have in ValueEd is growing individuals, is developing individuals. And one of the things that this platform has been able to do is really hone in and develop the skill of hosting and facilitating. And it was run, as you know, by Refilwe Ikwamaje, and she is still part of it. But what we've tried to do is take the baton and hand it over to someone who can, I think, really benefit from those skills and also contribute in the manner that they can. So my role is to really say, Tseko from ValueEd, thank you very, very much. Thank you for doing this. Thank you for taking the step to do this. And I'm going to hand over to you so that you can introduce a wonderful guest. And I'm going to switch off my camera and go into the background so that I can just listen. But well done to you, Tseko, and thank you for doing this. And thank you, guests. Thank you for everybody who's joined. And without further ado, we are recording. Over to you, Tseko.
Thank you so much for that warm welcome, Uncle Vic. And thank you to the ambassadors and previous attendees of the Celebrating Women event and new attendees as well. Thank you so much for joining us this Saturday morning. My name is Tshepo Sibohudi, and I'm the Chief Excellence Officer at ValueEd. And today I get to wear the host hat. And I'm really, really excited to be interviewing or having a conversation rather with Helen Buhrs. She is, I hope I'm saying your surname correctly. Is it Buhrs?
Perfect.
Fantastic.
That's perfect.
Thank you so much. We're going to be having a conversation with Helen Buhrs today, and she is an incredible woman. She is the Chief Executive Officer of Endscape Design Colleges. And not only that, she's a thought leader as well. She's a mom, a wife, and a businesswoman, to name a few of the titles that she holds. And she's passionate about shifting a culture of exclusion by...
Hi, checking out. 211.
Could you mute, please? Thank you. Exclusion by empowering women and girls to claim their space in the world with grace. And we're excited to have you here to have this conversation with us. Thank you so much for joining us, Helen.
Thank you, Tshepo, and thank you, Vikele, and your team for all the work that you guys do. It is most inspirational, and I'm just blessed and honored to be part of this today. So I really hope that I'm going to be able to do justice to the work that you guys are doing.
Absolutely, absolutely. And today's theme, well, we're going to be discussing Helen and her phenomenal story, which I got to read a bit of while preparing for this event. And it's an incredible story, and she's going to tell us her story. And the theme is, her choice, her responsibility, and that it starts with her. The life of Helen Buhrs is a story of bravery, determination, passion, and patience. And I think we can get started, and we can get started by, sharing a bit about yourself and what your background is and where you come from.
Cool. Thanks, Tshepo. So I'm going to try and give you 45 years in a condensed version, and I'm going to even get down to the nitty gritty and down to the dirty. So yeah, this is me being authentic. This is me presenting my life to you. I hope that there'll be a small tidbit out of this that everybody in the audience can take from. I hope that there'll be some form of inspiration in the story for the people in the audience. And I'm open to any questions. If, I think let's keep the questions to the end. But if there's anything, I'm quite open. If I feel uncomfortable to answer something, I'll say so. But I really try to take a reflection of my life more from a personal perspective than from a business perspective, if you like. So here goes. So I've lived within a 5-kilometer radius in the town where I was born. I haven't got around much. I was born in Pretoria, in Moedersbond, and this is where I still am today. if I look at my life and I do an analysis of what I've been up to during this period, I can tell you that I've spent 78% of my life working. I've spent 51% of my life parenting, 38% of my life studying, volunteering, and being married. And I've spent 16% as a business owner. I've also spent 9% of my life on medication, and I'll share a little bit of that with you today too. It's pretty safe to say that most of my time I've spent with others in mind, whether it's been working for the good of a business, ensuring the safety and well-being of my children, contributing to a meaningful relationship with my husband, or even offering my time as a volunteer in various organizations. When I started preparing the talk on my story for you today, I found it quite challenging. My waking hours are spent thinking of others, planning for others, preparing for others. Anybody in the room who works, is a mother, is a wife, is a friend, knows that life is busy and it's only getting busier each year. I don't generally prioritize time for myself. I don't take long winding walks on my own. I'm not the kind of person who takes girly weekends away. I don't attend a book club. I spend a minimum amount of time shopping, at the hairdresser, having my nails done. And every now and then I might treat myself to a Thai massage. But for the most part, most of my life revolves around other people. It sounds terrible. I'm not miserable by this challenge that I face. I accept that it's the choices I've made in my life that result in where I am. And in fact, today, I'm particularly content with where I am. So if I give you a little bit of a snippet of my career, I started my career at the age of 10. I was delivering newspapers. Each morning I had 62 crisp copies of the Pretoria News that I had to disseminate in my neighborhood. And I needed to do this each weekday before school. I remember the lady that I needed to pick the papers up from each day. She wasn't an angry lady, but she didn't speak much. And I also realized through some of my most recent sort of reflections, she was the only female boss that I would ever have. During my teen years and as a student, I worked consistently. I waitressed, I was the hostess at an Italian restaurant, I worked on the floor in retail in places like Total Sports and CNA. I was a shelf packer, I was a teller, I was an agent selling natural beauty products, I was a secretary, and I also did some babysitting. For my high school, I attended Woodmead High School. The school no longer exists, but it was a school that opened in 1970, and it was known as the first multiracial school in South Africa, the first fully multiracial school in South Africa. There were a diverse range of children who were taught together, they traveled on buses together, they ate together, and eventually those children lived together when the boarding school was opened. And if anybody here is familiar with our South African history, you'll know that in 1970, Black and white people were not allowed to travel on buses together. We were not allowed to be eating together. We were not allowed to be in classrooms together. But this was the fight that school fought. The aim of the school was to provide a liberal and a progressive education without being unduly bound by conservative tradition. The school focused on whole development of the students. It sought to free its students of prejudice, particularly about race, religion, and nationality. The school aimed to resist indoctrination by tolerance and by teaching its pupils to think for themselves so that they could make their own decisions. The school encouraged an appreciation of responsibility. It stressed initiative, originality of thought, and it aimed to develop each pupil's full potential. These words are actually taken out of the original writings when the school was established. And over the years, so of course I was in the school in the late 80s, early 90s, those concepts and that ethos had not changed. So my time at Woodmead has had a significant influence in my life and my career. And if there's anybody on this call who works with me, I'm sure they would have picked up some of those values that we instill at Endscape today. When I matriculated, I wanted to be a dancer. I went for an audition and I was accepted at the Johannesburg Dance Foundation. So at 17, my parents moved me into an apartment in Yeoville. I lived opposite the band members of the Prophets of the City, and I spent far too many nights at Rocky Street as a groupie of this band. I would walk to my dance classes each day in Braamfontein. One day I even had my sunglasses stolen off of my face. I remember another time where I was offered to peddle drugs through a flight. And so that was the kind of environment I found myself in when I was young and quite naive. Unfortunately, my newfound freedom got the better of me. And halfway through the year, I was told that I was not committed enough. I was not strong enough to continue with the program. And now when I look back, I realize I probably spent too many nights on Rocky Street, and I spent too many nights following the profits of the city. I returned to Woodmead, the school that I'd been at, as an intern for the remainder of the year. And there I worked as a teacher assistant in the art and the drama department. At the end of that year, my dad said to me, okay, right, now I really needed to be doing something a bit more formal. And he said I needed to find something to study. And so I enrolled myself at what was then the Pretoria Technikon, now TUT, Tshwane University of Technology. And I enrolled for what was sort of a general design qualification in the first year. And we did ceramic design, and we did art, and we did technical drawing and so on. And in that first year, we had to then decide what we wanted to specialize in the next year. And my first choice was graphic design. My second choice was interior design. I was never given my first option. Perhaps it just wasn't good enough. I don't actually know why. But I landed up studying interior design. I had no idea what interior design was at the time, but that was next on the list. And so that was what I was going to do. And I remember those days quite fondly. I made some really good friends. And I was told recently that I was a little bit of a head girl. I think I continued to be a bit of a head girl in my life. I took it upon myself to translate all the Afrikaans textbooks into English so that the non-Afrikaans speaking students, particularly those students from Northern African countries, could understand what it was they were studying. And I understand that they're still using those English translated textbooks today. My final year, I was 22. I did my BTech, so the fourth year. In that year, I got married and I gave birth to my first child. My husband and I had known each other through school. We were both at Woodmead. We'd often joked that we'd slept in the same bed since when we were young kids. We'd spent most weekends at each other's homes. We had a wonderful group of friends, and I actually grew up at his parents' house, at their house on weekends. We were childhood sweethearts, and whilst I was studying, he worked in Midrand at the Protea Hotel, and eventually, when we were 22, we got married. Since graduating, I've held a variety of positions as a designer, a draftsman, a lecturer, an assessor. I've done some work for the Council on Higher Education as an evaluator in accreditation of programs and institutions. I've been a campus principal, and more recently, in the last 10 years, I've held positions in management. So I've always chosen to work. In fact, most of my working life I've spent at Endscape. I've been employed at Endscape Education Group for 22 years, where I started as a part-time lecturer working 3 hours a week. And this was an interesting way that I came to be at Endscape. I remember I was actually in Truworths at Menlyn Shopping Centre, and I was trying on an outfit. I was in the dressing room, and my phone rang, one of those brick Nokia phones in those days. And it was this gentleman who said that he'd been referred to me by one of my lecturers that was at the Technikon at that time, and she had put my name forward as a potential lecturer. And he'd just opened a campus in Pretoria, and would I like to come for an interview? So I said, yeah, sure, that sounds great, because I'm not very good at saying no. I suffer from missing out issues, and so I tend to find myself saying yes to many, many things. Anyway, I went for the interview. I had never lectured in my life. I had only recently graduated, and I told him that I had absolutely no experience teaching. And he said, well, he thought that I would do a good job, and he'd like me to start the next week. And I said to him, okay, well, what shall I teach? And he said, well, just teach whatever you've learned. And I said, okay, great. And he gave me the keys, and that was that. The next week I came in, I opened the campus, and I started lecturing. My passion for young people and the difference I could make in their lives as a teacher sparked a very happy place deep in my soul, and I've been there ever since. So I'd been with the institution for only a couple of years when one April during the Easter break, my life was turned upside down. I woke up one Saturday and it was that time of the month. We needed to do our monthly admin. We needed to pay some some accounts and so on. And so I went down to our study, and in those days we still had a modem that you had to dial up on. And I wanted to go onto the bank account so I could make certain payments. And for some reason, the modem wasn't working. And I am to this day still quite technologically incompetent, but in those days, particularly more so. And I didn't understand why the modem wasn't working. And so I went to my husband and said, modem's not working. And he said, oh, I don't know, I've got no idea. And I said, well, I'm going to go down to the ATM and I'll just, check in the ATM, that there's enough money for us to make the payments and so on. And he assured me, and he said, no, there's definitely money in the bank account. I've made payments into the bank account, and you can definitely make the payments. So I went to the ATM, inserted my bank card, and the bank card wouldn't work, and took the bank card out, and I realized that the magnetic strip on the back of the bank card had been scratched. And I went back home, told my husband about this, and he said, well, that's very, very strange. So maybe we should just go into the bank, and you've got some checks, sign the checks, and we can make the payments with checks. And I said, well, I'm not really prepared to make the payments with checks unless I know that there's money in the bank account. And so eventually we had a huge domestic, and I never went to go and pay the accounts. But what I did do was I went off to Standard Bank, where I wanted to go and check what was going on and why the bank card wasn't working and so on. And I met a lady called Gaynor, and she sat me down, and we had a look at the bank account, and we discovered that there was no money in the bank account. And there was withdrawals that had been made at the carousel, and it was 1,000 Rand and another 1,000 Rand and another 1,000 Rand. And I was devastated. And she said to me, well, we can go onto the cameras at the carousel, and we can, because we've got cameras near the ATMs, and we can see. I said, I haven't drawn this money. And so she said she'll look into it. And it came back that the person who had drawn the money was my husband. So, of course, I went straight home, and I confronted him, and he, of course, denied everything. And I completely freaked out, and I told him to leave. A week later, I met him at McDonald's. Of course, by now, our child is 2 years old, Jordan. I met him at the McDonald's in Midrand, and I sort of confronted him about everything, and he continued to deny it. But he said to me that he had a gambling addiction, and that he hadn't taken all of the money. He might have just taken some of the money, but that he was seeing somebody at Gamblers Anonymous, and in fact, he had a job lined up. And I said, what do you mean you have a job lined up? Like, you go to work every day? And after the meeting, I then phoned Mark, who was his boss at the time, to find out that he hadn't actually been working for 6 months. In fact, he had told Mark that he had inherited a large sum of money and he didn't need to work anymore, and he'd bought me a business. And so Mark couldn't understand what was going on. I also phoned Gamblers Anonymous, and they'd never heard of him. And I also phoned this potential interview that he was supposed to be going to, and they had never heard of him. And so I there and then decided this was going to be the end of this relationship. So I had discovered that he had this gambling addiction, that he hadn't worked for 6 months. And he'd been pretending. He would get up every morning to go to work. He'd drop my son at creche on the way. And in the meantime, he'd emptied all of our bank accounts. He'd spent all of our savings, and our medical aid had not been paid. So at this point, I was 25 years old. I was 6 months pregnant with our second child. And I had just told my husband to move out and take a hike. So 3 months later, I gave birth to a baby girl, and I filed for a divorce. That was an interesting story in itself. I appointed a lawyer who was a friend of ours, and he insisted on a few things. He insisted that I should put maintenance into the contract. And I said to him, I want nothing from this guy. I don't ever want to see him again. He's completely let me down. He's completely hurt me and disappointed me. And he kept saying to me, you have to just put R1 maintenance per child into this agreement. And then he said to me, you also need to put into this agreement that your children can be adopted. And I said, and why on earth would I put this into the agreement that my children could be adopted? why on earth would I put this into the agreement that my children could be adopted? And he said, please just put it into the agreement. Anyway, I thought that this was crazy, because why on earth would I ever let my children and be adopted by somebody else? Anyway, I was born. I took 1 week's maternity leave, because at that time at Endscape, there was no such thing as maternity leave. If I didn't work, I didn't get paid. And I returned back to my lecturing post the next Monday with my baby. At 2 months, Gemma started at a creche so that I could focus on my work. I went on to be a single mother for 6 years, where I basically held down 3 jobs. So I would lecture at both our Pretoria and Johannesburg campuses. I would often get up at 4:30 in the morning, drive through, start my classes at 7 o'clock in the morning. I would sometimes lecture till 9 o'clock at night before I drive back. 3 nights a week, I would drive through to the Valour River, where I had a job with a development company that were building houses there, and I would paint kitchen cupboards, do paint techniques on kitchen cupboards. And then I would also design houses for another development company, or the interiors of those houses for Dainfern, which is now Dainfern Estate today. And for 6 years, I managed these 3 jobs and my 2 children. My first husband, Rod, never paid maintenance. He would often phone for Jordan's birthday. He would often make promises that he wouldn't keep. And he would very, very seldom interact with Gemma or ask about Gemma. Of course, he had spent a couple of years with Jordan and he had developed a bit of a relationship with him, but he had really never met Gemma. During this time, during these 6 years, he tried to take his life a few times. I received phone calls from a few girlfriends of his, and one day I even received a phone call from the father of one of his girlfriends, who was a pastor, who was very concerned about the relationship. And I was able to speak to this man. I wish now that I could actually speak to that man again, because there were some things that he said to me in that conversation that really changed my life. Rod went on to continue with his career in crime and stealing and so on as a result of his gambling addiction. And he eventually landed up in prison. He got a 3-year sentence for credit card fraud, which he served 18 months. And whilst he was in prison, he used to contact me. He still contacted me and used to tell me the stories of what life was like in prison, and how he was studying and that he was trying to become a better person and so on. And I always felt that the need to kind of support him while he was there, because I thought that, you know, shame this poor guy, it must be a really rough place to be. And I think also during this time, I always had a hope that he might come right and that we would eventually one day get back together. At 27, I suffered a severe burnout and I was diagnosed with depression. This was 2 years after my divorce. I took the medication for a few weeks and I hated the way it made me feel. I literally stopped taking it overnight and I carried on with my life. It took me 2 years before I was fully recovered. I tended to control my external environment as a coping mechanism. And if you ever visited my home, you would have noticed that everything was in a box, everything was labeled, everything was timetabled. We were so structured and so routine that you couldn't really ever step out of line. Everybody knew exactly what they had to do, when they had to do. Now, when I look back on those days, I realize it was my internal emotions and hurt and anger that I was trying to suppress through controlling my external environments. So my 20s were filled with turmoil, but I thrived on the fact that I was seen as a power woman, someone who got things done regardless, someone who stood up and fought, someone who just kept on going. And like I said, I became a complete control freak. I only wanted to be seen as successful. I made sure I was at every sports match. I was on the side of every sports field. I remember having many other children in our home in the afternoons and often sleeping over because I needed to show everybody that I was the superwoman who was the best mother, the best worker, the best manager, the best lecturer, the best friend to everybody, and so on. So I continued to throw myself into my work at Endscape. I volunteered on the school governing body, and I became involved in a few professional committees. I set myself goals each year, and by 30, I promised myself I would stop smoking and I would own my own house. And I did both of these things. I surrounded myself with friends who would become my greatest support. By the time I hit my 30s, I began to settle. My soul yearned for more, and I began to question life and spirituality. At this time, I didn't subscribe to religion. I believed I was the center of my universe and that everything was up to me. At 31, I just need to have a sip of water. Bear with me.
No problem.
I hope I'm not speaking too fast, Seho.
No.
No, good.
And I think everyone else is still with us. Thumbs up, guys.
So. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so
Absolutely.
the 20s, cool. So 20s was turmoil and trauma. In my 30s, 31, I met my now husband. I'd been divorced for 6 years, and he'd been divorced for just under 6 months. We met at a private function in a nightclub that he gate crashed. We had a mutual friend who was at this party that I was at, and that was how he managed to gate crash the party. Him and his friends had just been to the rugby at Loftus, and being newly divorced, he was going through his own emotions, and I think he'd had a bit of a bender that night, and they were all gung-ho for this night out and being free and so on. Anyway, he arrived at this party, and I noticed him immediately, and I went to my friend Linda and I asked her, who's that guy across the room? And she said, oh no, that's Dion. I said, oh wow, that's interesting. He looks really nice. And she said, well, that's interesting because he's just asked, who's that girl across the room? And so we'd noticed each other. And that night, I think I was there till 4 o'clock in the morning. We literally spent the entire night chatting. I told him my whole story. I'd never ever done that where I'd met somebody for the first time and just offloaded completely. But we connected absolutely immediately. 3 days later, he called me. And for any good girls in the room, you'll know that there's the 3-day rule. If the guy phones you before 3 days, he's desperate. If he phones you after 3 days, then you don't give him the time of day. 3 days on the dot, he gave me a call and we went for coffee. Turns out this man was reliable. He had integrity. He was on the straight and narrow and an incredible human being. I must also say that he was not my type. So I had always gone for tall, dark, handsome guys, and he was tall, but he was quite lanky and blonde. But there was obviously something that had connected us. So where am I now? I've lost myself in my notes, remembering my first meeting with my husband.
Beautiful.
Anyway, of course I had so reliability, integrity. We went for coffee. We agreed that when we went for coffee that the kids, they were now 6 and 8 years old, so 8 and 6 years old. We agreed that he wouldn't meet the kids at the beginning, that we wanted to first determine whether we would like each other and whether this relationship could work. And so it was only a few months later that he even met the kids. That actually happened eventually. They'll tell wonderful stories about the day he walked into the front door and what a nerd he was and how they thought that he was the uncoolest guy. And now today, they'll give you a very different story about the relationship with him. But that was the first time he met them. 18 months later, we were engaged. And 4 months after that, we were married. During the time that we courted, he joined me at a 40 days workshop. I'd been convinced to attend this workshop by some of my friends. And it was during this workshop that I would be saved. We attended a divorce care program, and that in itself was a very interesting and funny story because, of course, you can imagine all these divorcees coming to this divorce care program are angry and bitter and very anti the other sex and so on. And here we were sitting in the back row holding hands and giggling as girlfriend and boyfriend. It wasn't my idea to attend the divorce care program. In fact, having been divorced for 6 years, I was convinced I didn't need such a program. It was him that convinced me to go with him to the divorce care program. And it's probably the best thing I ever did in my life. Those 12 weeks were a life changer. They were incredible. And I realized how much I had actually held back, how much I had limited myself, how much I had just not dealt with at all. After the divorce care program, we went on to be baptized and we became members at the Waterkloof Baptist Church. We fell pregnant on our wedding night. And our third child, Jethro.
Sumo, could you mute your mic, please?
There we go.
Thank you.
Okay, so on our wedding night, we fell pregnant, and yes, it was planned. We planned the wedding around my cycles because we knew that we wanted to immediately have a baby. And this was also kind of a bit strategic after some work we'd done together with the psychologist. We'd agreed that we were going to have children. We'd agreed that the children would be part of one family and one unit. And the psychologist had said to us, try and have a baby as quickly as possible. And we did exactly that. She also suggested that because our children's names both started with the J, Jordan and Gemma, that we should continue calling our children with the letter J. And so now we have a Jordan, a Gemma, a Jethro, and a Jessica. Anyway, when I was pregnant with Jethro, I went for the usual tests. I was now a bit of an older mother in my 30s, and we got a positive test for spina bifida. And they said to us that we would need to have another scan in a few weeks' time. And at that scan, we would determine whether it was spina bifida or not, and that we would have to consider terminating the pregnancy. We agreed that regardless of what that result came back with, that we were not going to terminate the pregnancy. And that was just another sort of traumatic event, I suppose, that we went through together as a couple, which we navigated. And of course, Jethro was born. He's 100% perfect, and he's an amazing, wholesome human being today. At the same time, when I was pregnant with Jethro, I went on to study a postgrad in education and wrote my exams heavily pregnant. And I remember that being particularly traumatic. So 18 months after we'd been married, when Jethro was 9 months old, Dion adopted my first two children. And you'll remember that the lawyer had said to me specifically, put in this agreement that your children can be adopted, which I thought was absolutely crazy. When we got married at the actual ceremony, we held a special ceremony where he adopted them in faith and in love, but we could only legally adopt them once we'd been married for 18 months, and that's because of the law in South Africa. So that again was another process that was a very interesting and difficult process to go through, because we had social workers in our house. We had social workers asking us the most bizarre questions. And as a mother who's raised her children and been so dedicated and committed to her children, to be questioned about how you deal with your children is something else. You know, you don't imagine that when you're going through a spousal adoption like that, you would have to navigate something like that. Anyway, we did. A year later, we suffered a miscarriage, and then we went on to fall pregnant with our last born. We've been happily married for 13 years this year. Yay!
Amazing. That is absolutely amazing.
Sorry. Okay, so back to the career. So Endscape has always been an extension of myself, and I've continued to be extremely committed to the organization and what it stands for. In the early 2000s, I was responsible for the initial accreditation of the institution and its programs. So those who are in education will know that before this time, private institutions were not regulated. And so whilst I was very newly employed there, that was a process that we went through. I went on to work through the departments, all the various departments in the organization, and I literally learned the business from the inside. So I gained insight into the HR departments, the finance, the technology, and all the subsidiary departments around the academics. So after 16 years of total commitment to the organization, I would be blessed with an incredible opportunity. And I specifically mentioned 16 years because I think these days, a lot of young people think that their careers are going to progress very quickly, but it takes a long time and a lot of hard work to get to where we get to eventually. So in 2014, I was 38 years old, and I acquired 80% of the institution from the previous owner and my boss at the time. I had been his 2IC for many years. His father had started the business in 1981, and his children were not really interested in taking over the business. So I was his exit strategy. The shift from employee to owner and head honcho was the steepest learning curve in my life. I had a lot to learn about business. Remember, at this stage, I'm a designer and I'm an educator at heart. I had no formal training in business. For 4 years, I failed forward. I took learnings from every choice I made. I brushed myself off often, and whether it was in naivety or in brevity, I motored forward passionately. Results were key, and often relationships came second. So within 2 years, I'd grown the business to the point that I had paid for the 80% equity. I acquired 2 buildings and we moved the existing campuses in Johannesburg and Pretoria to those buildings. 2 years later, at 40, I acquired the remaining 20% of the business. At this point, my children were 18, 16, 6, and 4. So we were doing matric and grade 1, and all 4 children were in different schools. There was a point where I realized that I had become consumed with the efficiency of the business. And this was in an attempt to drive profit, to grow it and become as big as possible. It worried me that I'd lost touch with the students and my love for education. And I knew I needed to be intentional about shifting my focus back to serving others. So in 2015, I started a scholarship program. In the last 7 years, we've assisted 188 South Africans to access quality higher education. 60% of all of our applicants to the program are from child-headed households, and the program has had a 94% success rate. And there are many amazing stories there. The program has been mainly self-funded, and we've had some contributions from the corporate sector. At 42, I suffered my second severe burnout, and again, I was diagnosed with depression. For 6 weeks, I was absent from work and I was useless to my children. My husband, however, was my rock. The institution had grown from a small family-run business to a national multi-campus operation. I could no longer take responsibility for the growth strategy and be deeply involved in the operations of the business. I'd become thinly spread in the magnitude of the responsibility of owning a private higher education institution with an increasing demand from its customers and regulatory environment, coupled with the responsibility for the livelihoods of many individuals and their families, had taken its toll. My husband assisted me in navigating this time. When I was ready to give up and throw the towel in, he reminded me of where my strength lay. We consulted with an elder in our church, and he basically was the person who explained to me that I now needed to separate the strategy from the operational sides of the business. During those 6 weeks, we've got some incredible people, and they kept it going. Sorry.
Oh. Also, can I just quickly ask that if anyone has questions or any comments, please add them into the chat, and we'll get to them after this talk.
Seho, I promised myself I was going to hold it together. But anyway.
Okay. I feel like I'm going to cry with you, but one of us needs to be strong.
Okay, there we go. All right. Whew. Okay, so the decision to appoint new team members who I could rely on was crucial to the sustainability of the business. That church elder went on to become my COO. Oh, look at me.
It's okay. I'm going to join you now.
Okay, everybody, just give me a second.
No, it's okay. It's okay.
So if you've read anything about me, you'll know that I'm terribly authentic, often to my own detriment. Okay, so that church elder went on to become my COO, and he held the business together for the next 2 years. He later on moved into a CIO position when I was ready to take the business back. It took me 2 years to fully recover. So I'm now 45 years old. I have an excellent team supporting my vision, and the business is thriving. And last year, RMB Corvest acquired 49% of Endscape. They've come on board as a partner to realize the further growth strategy of the business. And I'm excited for the next phase of my life and to enter it aware that it will be tough and that I need to prepare for this ride. This year, in preparation, I've enrolled for my MBA, and I'm doing a significant amount of work in the area of governance and risk to ensure the continued sustainability of the business. We're about to launch a new subsidiary called Grip Learning. It's an augmented online offering that aims to contribute towards upskilling developing countries to meet global demands. I continue to ensure that the brands under my care remain relevant and authentic. My children are thriving. So Jessica, who's my youngest, is now in grade 4. She's grappling with the concept of parents who are not so cool anymore. I can see she's starting to worry about what other people think of her, and she's figuring out how to express herself appropriately to meet the needs of her tween audience and her ever expecting parents. She's an avid gymnast, and she's been selected for the Olympic development team. She loves her piano and singing and her pets. Jethro is woke. He's now in grade 6. He schools us often on how the world works, and it's great to have an almost teenager to keep us on the straight and narrow. Coming to the end of his primary school years, he started to question his position in the feeding chain. He realizes that his place of kingpin and hero will soon be over as he enters a new system as the bottom feeder. He talks about that a lot. Jethro loves his chess. He recently achieved his provincial colors. He plays tennis and cello and the saxophone. Gemma has started her 3rd year in engineering at Stellenbosch University. She's a very responsible individual. She takes her studies seriously, and the work she puts in shows in her results. She's the most joyous of our children, and she has an energy that is extremely contagious. Everything she puts her mind to, she achieves. It seems this year she's working on balancing her life with sport and social gatherings. She's preparing for the half Ironman in November and often sends us photos of her runs through the mountains by day. Equally, we get photos of her dress-up parties and other social events by night. She's living her best life. Jordan, our eldest, he's now 24. He's entered the world of work this year. And so this year, we stopped paying rent, which we're very grateful for. He's moved into an apartment in Greenpoint with some of his friends. And this is an amazing achievement for a parent, that moment when you realize that your child is adulting successfully. Jordan is our least conventional child. He holds down a full-time job as an instructional designer, and he's also a YouTuber. He's managed to monetize his site, he's registered a company, and he's got some really big, audacious goals he's working towards. He has an incredible amount of empathy for people and the nicest nature. Everyone loves Jordan. My marriage is solid. Dion continues to be my rock. He supports me in my career choices and now my studies too. After a long Saturday afternoon in the books, he's interested in how my day at school was, and I love that. He encourages our children to support me too. He takes the time to explain to them why this is important and that it is also a long journey. We continue to do life together. We gym together at night. We plan our holidays together. We have recently opted to migrate to a plant-based diet. He's better at it than I am, but we do this together. Every Tuesday, we do Bible study together, and every Thursday, we do date night without fail. We share our dreams and our fears. We share our mistakes, and we share our successes. My career is evolving, and I'm blessed to have been able to address you all and share my journey. Reflecting on my story and realizing that almost 80% of my time has been spent working, I thought it would be important to mention, seeing as we are celebrating women, that except for the newspaper lady, all of my bosses and business partners have been men. In fact, most of the consultants I have ever appointed have been men. The people I encountered in my recent corporate transaction have been mostly men. I've experienced sexual advances from 3 of my bosses and 1 regulatory inspector. A number of bosses have verbally abused me. Today's talk has helped me to realize that us as women have got complex stories to tell. Our layered stories include trials and temptations. I recently came to realize that trials are externally forced upon us, like the abusive boss, the disappointing husband, the less desirable work environment. We seldom have control over the trials in our lives. The trials in our lives create a space that is uncomfortable and often scary. When we work through these trials, remaining faithful and steadfast, we grow in character. On the other hand, temptation emerges from within, and we are called to control what leads us into temptation. The temptation of promiscuity, the temptation of alcohol and substance abuse, the temptation to gossip, the temptation to give up, the temptation of the ego to be seen as successful. When we submit to temptation, we experience destruction in our lives. So my greatest learnings that I've taken from my life so far include from my male bosses, mutual respect and self-worth is imperative. From my divorce, that honesty and integrity is my non-negotiable. From my single parenting days, that a functioning family unit does not need to be traditional. From my burnouts, traumatic events will happen in my life, and they tend to manifest in depression 2 years later. It takes me 2 years to fully recover, and I need to prepare for these moments. From my husband, to be vulnerable builds trust. And from my children, to be great, to be kind, and to have fun. And in fact, we say these 3 words to each other every morning when we depart. Thank you, Tseho.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for sharing your story, for being authentic. You know, it was a very, very captivating story and extremely inspiring for me, and I assume for many of our audience as well. Again, thank you so much for taking time and sharing that with us. We have a couple of questions that I'd like us to go into, and I'll start with this one that I've also written down, and that is, you know, looking back, is there anything you would have done differently in your life?
So I have to be honest, I live without regret. I believe that everything that happens in our lives happens for a reason. And would I have done things differently if I knew what I know now? Most probably I would have. But I can't regret that I did things the way I did them. You know, I think it's always good to look back and to reflect on where we come from. But if we keep looking back, then we're going to get stuck there. You know, I prefer to look through the front windscreen than in the rearview mirror. So yeah, and so yeah, I mean, it's difficult to know whether I would have done things differently because I had what I had at the time. And I think often we beat ourselves up, you know, looking back on our lives. I should have done this. I could have done that. Why didn't I think about it like that? And, you know, we spend energy in an area that isn't going to make a difference. I also heard a very interesting thing the other day, that our past experiences is our perception of that event. And often we'll make movies in our head about how it happened. Yes. But the minute we allow ourselves a new perspective on our past, we often break those chains. And so sometimes if we just ask ourselves the right questions and we allow ourselves to see it from a different perspective, sometimes that past baggage that travels with us is our own baggage and our own things that we bring with us.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Incredible. Josh has asked a question. He asked, how did you go about building a team of people who could overtake the day-to-day running of your business? And what key strategies do you feel aided in the success of your team?
Wow, so I think I've probably been blessed to have people cross my path. I can't say that every person who is in my team I appointed. In fact, a lot of people that are in our team, and when I say team, I'm saying there's 200 of us right now. You know, I haven't had the privilege of appointing all of them, but I've had the privilege of being able to keep them all. And when I say keep, I don't mean make them stay. I mean, you know, almost try and have some kind of influence into their lives. I try my very best to lead with authenticity. I try my very best to be caring of other people and to try and understand other people's position and place. I don't always get it right, but it's certainly something that I strive for. I definitely haven't always done it. I think as I've grown and I've become a bit wiser, I've adopted those sorts of strategies. I think, like I said earlier, there were times in my career where you know, I was more about the productivity and the outcome than I was about the relationship. And I think in the last maybe 3 to 5 years, I've started to work more on relationships than on the output of the product that we create.
Awesome. Also, Josh had a comment and he said the tears are a testament of how much of a difference your team has made. And I agree.
So I think as an organization, that's one of the things we talk about is making a difference. So we have our values, which is quality, authenticity, and relationships. And when we talk about quality, it's not about necessarily setting a standard. It's about the difference you make when you set that standard. So, it's one thing to arrive to a meeting. It's another thing to engage in the meeting, to take responsibility in the meeting, to take initiative in the meeting, to be kind in the meeting. So it's what you do when you show up. That's the quality, and it's the difference that you make in people's lives.
I absolutely agree. Elizabeth Smith said, a wonderful family, well done.
Thank you.
Josh asked where we can find Jordan's YouTube channel. We'd love to subscribe.
Okay, I'm sure if you just if you search Jordan Buhrs, you'll find it. His talk is called The Greatest Big Talk Show. Big talk show. So
I hope you got that, Josh.
Yeah. I hope I got that right. He's going to kill me if I didn't.
We'll find it.
Yeah, but if you search Jordan Buhrs, you'll get it.
Awesome, will do. And Karabela Mukwena said, I appreciate how authentic you are, which is very rare these days. Everyone is either hiding behind their masks, figuratively and literally, and often surpass the fact that we are only human.
Yes, and it is so difficult to not be authentic. It's, I think we talk about showing up as you and showing up in the whole of you. It's difficult to try and be something you're not. It's difficult to try and be like somebody else. That takes a lot of energy and a lot of effort. It's much easier just to be yourself. And I realize that not all environments are accepting of that. But I still think we owe it to ourselves to be who we are and to be steadfast in our beliefs and our core values.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Pendula Nyezi, one of our ambassadors, also Karabela is one of our ambassadors as well. She says that she loves you, Helen.
Oh, sure. Thank you.
Mulalo says, thank you for sharing, Helen. You are an inspiration to all of us.
Thank you, Mulalo.
Karabela Mukuna says, I was a party agent during last year's elections at the Waterkloof Baptist Church. I think that you guys have met before.
Who's that? Sorry?
Karabela Mukwena.
Oh,
she
really?
That, yes,
okay.
I think she says that she thinks you guys have met before.
Oh, okay, cool.
Josh says, incredible story. So many lessons to be learned. Thank you for having the courage to be so open and honest with us today. Thank you, Helen.
Thank you.
Musima Pale says, thank you for sharing your authentic self with us, Helen. Inspiring and encouraging us to continue to push boundaries and make our mark in society as women.
Thank you, Musima. And Musima is one of my colleagues, so I appreciate that. Thanks, Musima.
Thank you. Nansanta Koko, one of our ambassadors as well, has asked, how did you move past those points of uncertainty, the times where you were not sure of yourself and your choices?
Sure. So I would like to think I'm a good decision maker, and I tend not to beat myself up about the decisions that I make. I recognize that when we make decisions, we make the decision with the information that we have at hand. And as long as we're making the decision with the right intention, then we can't doubt that decision. And so the intention is what we put in before us. And the people that decision is going to impact are the things that we need to think about. And I can give you an example. So, when COVID hit, and as a business, like all other businesses, we needed to shift. The thing that I noticed the most was that people just wanted somebody to make a decision. It didn't actually matter what the decision was. But I knew that whatever decision we made was going to have consequences later, and often unintended consequences. And I knew that if I was making all those decisions with the right intentions at heart, that I couldn't be making the worst decisions. And so, yeah, I almost want to say, in those times of uncertainty, it's about reaching deep into the soul and to that place of what is my intention.
Indeed. Lemohang, good morning all. Thanks for sharing your incredible journey with us, Helen. Me Helen, how do you get in touch with you for our future workshop invites?
So I think Vikela and Tseho, you've got my details.
We'll definitely share with you, Lemohang. And she also said, would you take a minute right here to talk about the male figure going through a hard time and contemplating suicide?
Wow. Sure, that's quite hard and deep. Somebody who's contemplating suicide, I think, needs to realize that that is a decision that is finite. It's definite. And every problem that we encounter has many solutions to it. We don't need to choose the solution that determines one outcome. There are always other ways. There are always other people. There are always other avenues to consider. I think that's a very, very serious comment that's been posted there. And I think if the individual wants to talk after this meeting, I'm happy to make myself available. Because I think I don't think that's something we can unpack right here, right now. But I think knowing that, you know, suicide only has one result.
It does. But
when we sit in places where there are big problems, there are many solutions to problems. And I think it's in conversation that we unpack those things, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Another question that we have is, well, it's a question from me. I can imagine you're very hands-on. You've always been hands-on, you know. And how were you able to give up control and trust your team with your business completely, you know, for the time you had to be away? Because I'm a control freakish, but I know a lot of people are going to say, no, you are. And it's very difficult for me to trust people with certain things or certain tasks. And it's a struggle, and it's not something I want to continue doing. I want to be okay with trusting people to do their jobs. But how were you able to navigate that?
So let's first start by saying I don't have it 100% right, Seko. That I don't think that it is an easy thing. You know, when you've nurtured something for a very long time, it is scary to let go. You know, it's a little bit like raising children, and then they turn 18 and they need to move out and go and spread their wings. You know, you want to make sure, are they warm? Are they eating properly? You know, what are they getting up to? You know, how many girls are they dating? And you know, and those are the control things that we put in place, right? I don't think I get it 100% right. It would be interesting if one of my colleagues who are on the call would like to contribute to this specifically. But I do think that I've established a great trust between myself and my colleagues. We have an open door policy at the organization. I know most of the staff members. Probably the newer staff members that are part-time lecturers and people in those sorts of positions, I might not know them all. But I like to think that I have a very good relationship with all of the staff at various levels as well. And we are friends at Endscape. And I think we have a wonderful environment where I like to think that we support each other and we support each other's successes and mistakes, and we grow from those things. So I do think it's built through trust. Of course, trust is broken very quickly and very easily. And so it's not something that you gain and it's there forever. I think it's something that you continuously work on. I know where my weaknesses are. I don't return calls as quickly as I should. I don't check in on people as often as I should. I know these things, and it's something that I try and work on. But yeah, I do think that it's a consistent effort. And I guess it's in any relationship, right? So it's in work relationships, but it's in family relationships and even marriages and so on too.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. Another question is, have you experienced any resistance when you were leading men?
I think I've probably experienced more resistance from women than from men.
Interesting.
Yeah, we have a female dominant environment. In fact, we've brought men in to try and balance it out over the last few years, the last sort of 5 to 10 years. We are an organization with strong women and strong personalities. And so I think that's probably why you experience that. Not everybody's going to just be told what to do. Everybody has a voice, and we encourage those voices. And I've probably experienced more of that from the women in our organization than from the men in our organization. I can't offhand think of any kind of resistance specifically from men, but I also want to say that I don't think we treat one gender better than the other. I think at Endscape we don't have things like pay gaps between genders. We don't have pay gaps between regions. If you in a certain position, there's a benchmark for that salary, for example, and whether, regardless of who you are, what gender you are, where you live, those things don't matter. So I can't offhand think of any particular resistance that I've had of somebody who works for me, let's say.
All right. I had another one. Well, I think it's a comment, and it's from Renee. She says, trust is the biggest factor. Understanding what we stand for and paying it forward.
Awesome.
And then Joshua, what advice would you give to everyone who's building a business that they want to scale and grow to the magnitude of what Endscape has managed to do?
Sure. I think you've got to know where you're going. You've got to understand what your vision is. You've got to recognize what you have available to you now, and you've got to realize where your gaps and your weaknesses are, and have strategies to fulfill those gaps. I think, again, focusing on intentions. The times that Endscape has done better is the times when we've not focused on the bottom line. It's the times when we've arrived at work to do the best work we can do, to be the best people we can be, to realize dreams of the youngsters who come through our doors as students and land up as graduates. It's those times that we've actually done our best work and achieved our best results. So I think it's too easy to say I want to be a millionaire and I want to make millions. There's a lot of hard work that goes in to achieving success, and it's not necessarily got to do with money.
That is amazing. That is inspiring. Actually, something to think about. That is really something to think about. And Auslitzer Rankin has said, incredible story, Helen. I am interested to know how you recovered from depression and what drove you to get well and continue going strong, especially that you got it at 27 and again at 42.
So my depression at 27, I don't think I recovered from. I think I pushed it under the carpet, ignored it, and carried on. I didn't put mechanisms in place. In fact, I was very much in a state of denial about it. When I had my second bout of depression and that burnout, I put a lot of lifestyle changes in place. So, for example, I needed to reposition people in the business. I needed to step away operationally. I needed to find the things that put me in a happy place, that filled my love tank in work. I had to start separating the business from me. And saying, well, here's this entity and this is what it does, and it doesn't have to be everything that I do. And I had to start being more intentional about the time I spent with my family, the time I spent with my children, the things that I do for myself. And that was very, very difficult. And I do it all the time. In fact, in December, I said, right, what am I going to do for myself this year? And one of them was I'm going to study. And the other one was that I wanted to start doing more talks like this to try and inspire and influence women, through their lives, because that fills my love tank. It gives me a sense of purpose. So so I think the recovery is not about just popping some pills and hoping for the best. It meant I had to change my diet, eat better. I had to try and exercise more. I had to spend more quiet time. I had to reserve time for myself, even if it was just me and myself in a room reading a book. Also, interestingly, the second time round, my doctor prescribed 4 holidays a year. And he said to me, I had to do that. And I do it. So since then, every year we plan 4 holidays. And they don't have to be big, long, expensive holidays. It might be a weekend away here or a weekend away there, but it just breaks the year up and it gives me something to look forward to. So that is one thing that I've done. And then I also had to being more intentional about my time. So again, some of my colleagues in the room will know this about me. I have doing weeks and thinking weeks. So I prescribe time and I say, right, this is a thinking week. And if I'm in my thinking week and you ask me to do something, I will ask you to please, if I can please have it to you by next week, because I know in next week I'll be doing things, because doing things and thinking about things takes a different type of energy. And so I would prepare myself for the week knowing this is a thinking week. And it's generally a slower week where I allow myself time to make decisions and to really think things through. Because if I'm in a doing week, I don't have the ability to think about things. Then I know I'm ticking things off the list and getting documents out or doing whatever it is I need to do. So I've had to put techniques in place to help me to manage my own burnout.
I think that's something I also want to start doing. And you've given me a great idea. Thank you so much, Helen.
I hope it works for you.
It will.
Some people that I've explained that to before look at doing days and thinking days. So I think it depends on what environment you find yourself in. Some people might not have the space to have a whole thinking week. Maybe they can only afford a thinking day, and then they've got to get back to doing things. But it's about managing your time in that space. Absolutely. And then, of course, the last thing is that I've learned to recognize how my body responds. And so as soon as I start feeling that feeling in my gut, I know that I'm feeling anxious, I'm feeling stressed, and I need to take time out, or I need to focus, or I need to talk to somebody, or I need to have a good cry, or whatever the case is. But also just listening to my body.
Sorry, I'll be right with you. There you go. Thank you so much for sharing, Helen. And I just want to wrap off by saying, sorry for not getting, well, I can't reach everyone's comments in the chat, but thank you so much for engaging with us. Bonolo has said this session has been impeccable, to say the least. Thank you for sharing your story with us, Helen. This talk will definitely stick with me forever, and it was really, really impactful. And from the Valour team and everyone, thank you so much, Helen, for taking time to speak to us as well. We are truly inspired, and you hold so much grace and power, and we're just grateful to be in the same virtual space as you. So thank you so much. And that is all for me.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. It's a privilege and a pleasure to share my story. And I really hope that everybody takes something out of it.
Absolutely. Uncle Vic?
Well, yeah, no, I mean, mine is just to end off and say, Helen, thank you for your story. We really believe in value add about talking and hearing everybody else's stories, because success is only sometimes looked at, blankly, and not people don't realize that there's a lot of work that goes on behind the success, whether it's personal or professional. And thank you for really revealing that to everybody that's here. I'm looking forward to a Celebrating Women program. I think everybody that's on board knows that we have a Men of Value event, a Celebrating Women event, but we also have a Men of Value program, which is just for men. And we would like to establish a Celebrating Women program, which is just for women, where a whole series of things that you've spoken about could be really subjects of conversation and subjects of topic. And you know that I'm scratching my head and trying to rope you in to be the sort of leader of that, the head of that, in terms of really engaging with those kind of conversations. And I'm looking forward to an amazing partnership with Endscape into the future. I just wanted teachers, can you just switch your cameras on quickly? Teachers and business people, because Helen obviously embodies both. I just want you to switch your cameras, but teachers, or put your hands up. There's, Jocelyn, I wanted to mention very, very specifically. We've just come off a teachers and educators program that Jocelyn actually heads up, where she's giving a lot of didactic teachings to online and face-to-face learnings. So Jocelyn, we've got a few others. Misha's here, I can see Zwaifana, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot of teachers here, as well as business people. Nontlantla, who's one of our ambassadors as well. So I'm sure you've heard the story of how things take time and how things grow over that. And I'd really like them to connect with you. By the way, also just to everybody's understanding, in terms of not just the teachers program, we've got a bullying program, which is being run by a mental health practitioner, as well as a behavioral specialist, Glenda Jumira. And I don't think she's here, but I just wanted to put that across as well. Helen, like you, we're trying to grow at ValueEd. We're not quite at 1,000 yet, but we're heading there. And we have amazing ValueEdians that are on board here. Thank you to all the guests that have come on board. And like us, we always ask for patrons to sponsor students. ValueEd, you have access to 18 courses with all these 18 different types of hosts who are like Jocelyn's, who are specialists in their field. So we look for patrons to be able to give access. Although our prices are 350 rands, that's still tough for some people. So we look for patrons. If you're a patron and you can put your hand up and go, yeah, I can do that, give up a bottle of wine just for the month, and join and support a student to come on board. But with that, having said that, it's Saturday afternoon. Let's not take up too much of your time, Helen. Tseko, you were brilliant. Yay! Well done to Tseko, her first ever hosting and facilitating at with Celebrating Women at ValueEd. By the way, other ladies that are here who are ValueEdians, we'll be looking out to you too, to come out and I think utilize this capability to speak, raise your voice, and talk on subjects that are really, really important. So until we see each other again, thank you, Helen. Thank you, everybody who attended. Thank you, ambassadors. Thank you, guests. Special mention to my wife, who's here. Letseko, she's the one who asked the question. And thank you to all those that have come through. Have a wonderful weekend. Have a safe weekend, and God bless everybody.
Thank
Cheers.
you.
Bye.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Have a wonderful weekend. Thank you.
Cheers, everybody. Cheers, cheers. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Well done, Tseko. Awesome
Thanks,
stuff.
Overtake.
Thank you, Helen, again. Thank you very much. Thank you. Cheers, everybody. Well, thank you, Helen. Thanks for that. That was,
Yeah,
geez,
it was good.
that was a real story.
Yeah.
And I think important, because I think everybody sees success and just assumes, success came with a silver spoon.
Yeah.
And to hear true life stories like that is, I think, amazing. Jocelyn, yes, there's Jocelyn. Sorry, Jocelyn. Jocelyn's been battling ESCOM. My lights went out, by the way, Jocelyn. It came on.
I'm so sorry, Helen, that I joined so late. I'm absolutely gutted. But I just want to say that the last bits that I caught of that, thank you so much. It was truly phenomenally inspirational. And I could hear from the strand of the meeting and the talk that you were having, the momentum that you had built. So thank you so much. And I'm really looking forward, like Uncle Vic says, I'm also calling him Uncle Vic now, like everybody else.
Even I want to.
I want to call him Uncle Vic. Yeah, everyone calls him Uncle Vic, so I'm going to say Uncle Vic. So Uncle Vic and I would, it would be wonderful to see how we can maybe work together at some stage, because we're trying to also build momentum with our teachers and educators program. And we've been going for a few weeks and we're getting there, but it would be wonderful to see how we can take it even further and grow it and expand it, and more importantly, reach more teachers than we're reaching currently.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it will be amazing. So Uncle Vic, you can coordinate with Helen and we can see how to maybe have a little meeting or something.
For
Sounds
sure,
amazing.
for sure.
Okay.
For sure.
Thank you, Helen.
Thanks very much. Have a good weekend,
Okay.
Helen.
You too.
All right.
Thank you.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Cheers, everybody.
Thanks, Vic. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching this ValueEd on-the-go recorded live session. If you enjoyed this session and would like to learn more, please head through to valueed.co.za/members. By becoming a member, you will be able to join our live and interactive sessions. This will allow you to ask the host questions, but also meet our other ValueEd family members who are part of this course. You will get access to all of our on-the-go recorded live sessions, as well as our other ValueEd sessions, including the Mogul Masterclass, Leadership Masterclass, and Career Discussion Academy. So, we hope that you decide to join the ValueEd family by heading through to valueed.co.za/members. Until then, we hope that you stay inspired to make better choices for tomorrow.